I'm Charles, and I'm on a mission to find what's inside everything. To help me get my answers, I have an industrial CT scanner. It takes a whole bunch of X-ray images from all around a subject, and then builds a 3D model revealing every internal detail. Today, we're pitting old versus new. This is the classic Game Boy from 1990, and this is the Analog Pocket from 2024. They both play the same games off the same cartridges, so let's see what 30 years of progress has gotten us. Let's set the scene a bit here. What was the state-of-the-art in electronics in 1990? Well, it was not the Game Boy. No, Nintendo's design team deliberately eschewed modern and recent components in favor of proven and cheaper technologies. Did this gamble pay off? Well, this was the most sold ever console, and it only lost that title to the PlayStation in 2000, 10 years after its launch. It would still be the most sold ever mobile console if it hadn't lost that title to Nintendo's successor to it, the DS. No, in 1990, the top of the line would have been Nintendo's other console, the SNES, which technologically would leave this thing in the dust by every possible metric. This is really a piece of refined 80s tech that was a staple of the 90s. Fast forward 35 years, and we have the modern replica. This, Analog is quick to point out, is not actually an emulator. Instead, it's a bit-for-bit and cycle-for-cycle replica of the Game Boy's Paleolithic processor. So let's take a look inside both of them and see how they compare. What's new, what's different, and do they still make them like they used to? It's time to pit old versus new. And the things that they share are, well, basically everything that you interact with. Let's start by looking at the buttons. I do like me a good button. Looking at them, they're basically the exact same. Now, those silicone domes have a conductive membrane on the bottom, and when you push in on the button, that dome deflects down and it will be bridging some contacts on the underlying circuit board with this piece of conductive material. On the Analog Pocket, we're still doing the exact same thing. You can see this structure looks remarkably similar, down to even having the same style of round nubbin cast into the bottom of the injection molded D-pad so that you get a similar feel. As we go through slice by slice, here's our silicone piece coming into view all around here. As we swoop down, we see that conical structure around the pin, and then we see the contacts on the circuit board. Now, on the Game Boy, these contacts look way more funky than the ones on the Analog Pocket. And the reason for that is that there's one way in which we don't make electronics like we used to. On the Analog Pocket, this has all been drawn on a computer. This is all just a perfect circle with a perfect bifurcation down the middle. But on the Game Boy, these have been drawn by hand. This is just this funky shape that you just had to make sure it was about right. All these wires have been sketched in by hand at whatever angle made sense. And on the Analog Pocket, well, all of our traces are perfectly aligned to a grid. They're all at perfect 45, 90 degree, and 0 degree angles. And there's a certain beauty to that, but that's a way in which they definitely don't make it like they used to. Nobody in a serious industrial context is laying out their circuit boards with, a pen and a Sharpie. There is a certain charm to the way it used to be. But overall, the style of the construction on these buttons has not changed one bit. So aside from the controls, what else is basically the same? These things both have headphone jacks, which is kind of shocking for a portable device in 2024, because for some reason, all of humanity decided that we shouldn't have headphone jacks. Not that I'm bitter or anything. Let's see if we can track those down on the Game Boy and on the Analog Pocket. Any headphones that worked in 1990 are going to work in 2025, but they're not built the same. Here, on the Analog Pocket, we can see that the headphone jack is very simple. Game Boy, however, there's a lot going on here. And a lot of that is down to just the economics of manufacturing at the time. This is its own fully built part that is actually supposed to go all the way out to the surface of the chassis. Whereas on the Pocket, it's really just the leads for the plug, and the chassis is the chassis with a 3.5mm hole in it. Is there a functional difference? Well, no. And I suspect if this style of jack had been available in 1989 when this thing was getting built, they probably would have elected to use it. This is a cheaper, easier to build, more cost-effective design than this. I just look at it. Now, of course, in use, the thing you're actually going to wind up spending the most time looking on and thinking about the differences is the screens. These two screens are similar, but also share essentially no resemblance whatsoever. You'll notice that it doesn't actually look anything like the classic black on green display of the Game Boy. But then, if we actually open a game on here, well, now they're a little bit closer. And of the two, nostalgia be damned,
I know which one I'd rather be using. The reason that the Game Boy didn't ship with a backlight is because it just uses too much power. The key selling point of this was that on 4 AA batteries, a point that we'll be getting back to, this thing would run for about 20 hours. That's kind of nuts. That increased battery life was a significant draw to consumers. These days, consumers are used to devices with batteries that die after, a couple hours of intense use. We also just wouldn't accept a backlight-free display that isn't, an e-paper or something. Having a display without a backlight would probably cost more than getting one with a backlight. So here we are with a full-color LCD that's being reduced to just displaying green and black. I'd say that's fair. This isn't, of course, the Charles Rambles About Tech that he's holding in his hands channel. This is the Inside Everything channel. In a portable game device like this, though, we now use rechargeable batteries. And I think that is a spot where I'm happy to say, thank goodness we don't build them like they used to. About half the volume of this entire device, if you remove the cartridge, is taken up by those batteries. You gotta do what you gotta do, but compare that to the Analog Pocket, it's just a night and day difference. One interpretation of this is that, sure, for twice the volume, you get about 20 hours of game time versus one volume, 10 hours of game time. But the actual device is a great deal smaller, easier to fit in the pocket if you wanted to, and you're not gonna generate a constant stream of waste and garbage, specifically waste and garbage containing hazardous chemicals, by using this. Install one lithium-ion battery in it at the factory, and it's good for the entire useful service life of the product. Analog Pocket is quick to point out that this isn't actually an emulator for this. Instead, what it is it's an exact re-implementation of the logic electronics inside of here using a reconfigurable microchip called a Field Programmable Gate Array, or FPGA, to actually make it do all the same calculations that are happening inside of here without any of the same hardware or without any software that infringes on Nintendo's copyrights. So, first question. What sort of microchips do we have in the Game Boy? Well, if we look at this, what immediately jumps out are these chips aren't actually in the Game Boy. What they are is they are in the game cartridge. And of course, Analog Pocket uses the same cartridges. So if we trim away the whole cartridge and most of the batteries, we wind up looking at a circuit board on which we struggle to find any large integrated circuits standing out. What gives, Nintendo? Meanwhile, if we look at the Analog Pocket, we immediately see some very large, very dense chip packages reaching out at us. We have this massive, massive chip. This is a 484 pin package. So there's almost 500 pins on this one chip alone. Now, I'm not a gambling man, but I suspect that that is more pins than you have every component of the Game Boy combined on this one single package. We also have all of our nice modern components. We have a large quad flat no leads package here. There's a lot of integrated circuits. Meanwhile, in the Game Boy, I can't see a darn thing. And when I was preparing for this episode, it took me a while to figure out what the heck was going on here. Because the Game Boy doesn't actually have packaged integrated circuits. Almost all of the chips are under these blobs. And that blob is what actually forms the package. Now, this is still a cost-effective way of doing things if you're making a million of something. So inside of the Game Boy, we actually have our integrated circuits glued directly onto the board underneath. The printed circuit board itself becomes the package for your chip because you glue the package down, do the bond wiring that you'd be doing inside of a fully packaged integrated circuit anyways, and then just kind of glue everything down to protect your bond wire. This is a great cost-saving measure if you know that you're going to have the economics of scale to support it. Now, when you're buying something like this, what you actually want to compare is it still fun? Did the limitations of the time make this more fun? With the exception of the backlight, everything on this behaves almost exactly the same, almost imperceptibly the same between these two devices. And with that in mind, I'd say, yeah, it is just as much fun. You can barely tell the difference, except this one doesn't require you to, squint and angle the daylight towards it in order to actually see what's going on the screen. So do they make them like they used to? Well, yeah, it's still really similar. It gets a very similar performance, it feels the same, and it plays the same games, but in ways where it doesn't matter. This is nothing like its predecessor. And let me know if there's some other gaming peripheral or gaming console even that you'd like me to take a look inside of. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave us a like. And if you want to see inside of something, leave a comment with your suggestion. If you want to support the channel, share this video with a friend, or check out hacksmith.store. And if you want to see inside of everything, get subscribed.